Good day everyone, Dr. Polaris here. Loch Morar is on the west coast of Scotland, not far from Loch Ness. The loch itself is the 5th largest in Scotland, with a surface area of 10.3 square miles, and is the deepest freshwater body of water in the British Isles. At its maximum depth, it lies at 1,017 feet, which is more than the height of the Shard building in London. Of glacial origin with steep sides and a length of 19 kilometres, which is 12 miles, Loch Morar is home to 5 islands and, supposedly, a large aquatic creature known affectionately as Morag. First reported in 1887, Morag has been seen over 30 times since. A pun on the name of the loch, Morag is often referred to as Nessie's cousin, with Loch Morar just 70 miles from Loch Ness. While modern sightings of Morag describe a long-necked, hump-backed Plesiosaur-like animal, older accounts feature a very different description. Alexander Carmichael, a prolific gatherer of folklore at the turn of the 20th century, gathered stories about Morag from the people living near the loch. His scripts have recently been uncovered by the Carmichael-Watson Project at the University of Edinburgh Library. The writings, thought to date from 1902, depict a being very much unlike those of Nessie. On the one hand, she is presented as a mermaid-like character with flowing hair, while another description paints her as a grim reaper whose sighting was viewed as an omen of death. Dr. Donald Stewart, a senior researcher on the project, discovered the text while leafing through a mixture of old folklore collected by Carmichael over 50 years. "We were so pleased when we found them. It was just totally unexpected," he said. In the first text, Carmichael stated that Morag is always seen before a death and before a drowning. The second text reads, "There is a creature in Loch Morar and she is called Morag. She is never seen save when one of the hereditary people of the place dies. The last time she was seen was when Aeneas MacDonald died in 1898. The Morag is peculiar to Loch Morar. She is seen in broad daylight and by many persons, including churchmen. She appears in a black heap or ball, slowly and deliberately rising in the water and moving along like a boat waterlogged. The Morag is much disliked and is called by many uncomplimentary terms." A final description, penned by Carmichael at a later date, retains Morag's association with death, but sees her take on a more human characteristic. All of this makes the entity sound rather more like the Irish Banshee than the late surviving Plesiosaur. Carmichael went on to state that, like other water deities, she is half human, half fish. The lower portions of her body is in the form of a fish, and the upper is in that of a small woman with highly developed breasts with long flowing yellow hair falling down her snow-white back. She is represented as being fair, beautiful, and very timid, and never seen when one of the Morar family dies, or when the clan falls in battle. Then she is seen rushing about with great speed, and is heard wailing in distress, bemoaning and weeping the loss of the house of Morar laid desolate. The Morag has often brought out of their houses at night the people living along the shores of the lake and in the neighbourhood of her haunts, causing much anxiety to the men and much sore weeping to the women. Carmichael, who became a figurehead for the Celtic artistic movement, originally wrote the texts in Gaelic. He is thought to have spent only a couple of days in the area of Morar and did not claim to see Morag for himself. His main source of information about the monster appears to be a local man named Ewan MacDonald. The first text was unearthed by Dr. Stewart in 2011, and he later happened upon the other two. Speaking about the findings for the first time, he said, "Clearly, there's something going on in Loch Morar, whatever it is. People make sense of it in different ways depending on who sees it, what they're feeling at the time, and how the story comes down from tradition afterwards. I think the texts are pretty exciting," he added. "They give us a window back to how people saw this monster well over 100 years ago. They're the first reported sightings that we have. It shows that there were other monsters vying for popularity, and Nessie happened to win out in the end. But there were a lot more of them out there. Likely due to the popularity of the famous surgeon's photo, which solidified the image of Nessie and other lake monsters as being late surviving plesiosaurs, Morag increasingly began to be depicted in a very similar manner. In 1948, a peculiar serpent-like creature about 20 feet long was reported by 9 people in a boat in the same place as the original 1887 sighting. The best known encounter, in 1969, involved Duncan MacDonnell, William Simpson and their speedboat. When recounting his story to the press, Simpson stated, "As we were sailing down the loch in my boat, we were suddenly disturbed and frightened by a thing that surfaced behind us. We watched it catch us up, then bump into the side of the boat, the impact of which sent a kettle of water I was heating onto the floor. I ran into the cabin to turn the gas off as the water had put the flame out. Then I came out of the cabin to see my mate trying to fend the beast off with an oar, but to me he was just wasting his time. Then, when I'd seen the oar break, I grabbed my rifle and quickly putting a bullet in it, fired in the direction of the beast. Then I watched it slowly sink away from the boat, and that was the last we saw of it." MacDonnell and Simpson later described the creature as long-necked, with a brown, streamlined body and a small head. A very similar image was provided by another sighting the previous year, when John McVarish, barman at the Morar Hotel, had his encounter with Morag. As he recounted sometime later, "I saw this thing coming. I thought it was a man standing in a boat, but as I got nearer, I saw it was coming out of the water. I tried to get up close to it with the outboard out of the water, and what I saw was a long neck 5 to 6 feet out of the water with a small head on the end, dark in colour, coming quite slowly down the loch. When I got to about 300 yards of it, it turned off into the deep and just settled down slowly into the loch out of sight. The neck was about 1.5 feet in diameter and tapered up to between 10 inches and a foot. I never saw any features, no eyes or anything like that. It was a snake-like head, very small compared to the size of the neck, flattish, a flat type of head. It seemed to have very smooth skin, but at 300 yards it's difficult to tell. It was very dark, nearly black. It was 10 AM, dead calm, no wind but brilliant sunshine. I saw it for about 10 minutes, travelling very slowly. It didn't alter its angle to the water. It looked as if it was paddling itself along. There was very little movement from the water, just a small streak from the neck. I couldn't really see what was propelling it forward, but I think it was something at the sides rather than behind it. Actual photographs of Morag are rare. A pair of these were taken in 1977 by Miss Mary Lindsay and show an object in the loch which is claimed to be Morag. The object appears to have moved several yards from one picture to the other. The first shows a round back, while the second picture seems to show 2 humps. Several more recent photos have also emerged, but all show dark, indistinct patches on the surface of the loch. What's more, the quality of the images leaves much to be desired, and it is difficult to make out any details with certainty. Since the famous sightings of the late 60s, Morag has been seen on several other occasions, and the loch's remoteness, as there is no road around it compared to Loch Ness, suggests that there would probably be many more sightings if the loch was more accessible. Perhaps unsurprisingly, several expeditions with the aim to prove or find the monster have been made, but no evidence for an unknown large creature has been found. Most recently, in 2013, tourists Doug Christie and his wife Charlotte claimed they spotted a 20-foot-long black shape in the water 3 times in 2 days, convincing them that the beast had returned. He takes up his story and said, "It was at 1:45 PM. My wife and I were sitting at the front of Swordlands Lodge at Loch Morar having a picnic, having walked the 5 miles or so, having parked the car at the end of the road at Barocca, when my wife spotted something in the water near the shore. It zigzagged for a couple of minutes near the shoreline before disappearing. I wish I'd taken a better camera, or even my binoculars to get a better view. We watched the water for another 20 minutes or so, but didn't see anything else unusual." So what may lie behind these sightings? The main problem with the theory that these creatures are actually physical animals is the lack of scientific evidence, and the fact that the lakes they are said to haunt do not support enough food to even sustain a small population of large animals. It is assumed that there must be more than just one creature to sustain sightings over such a long period of time. Other theories suggest that these sightings are related to misidentified fishes and mammals, such as catfish or a giant eel or sturgeon. One possible validation of this theory came in 1987, when the 900-pound, 11-foot-long sturgeon was found dead in Lake Washington, USA. Apparently, there had been a story about a giant duck-eating monster living in the lake for many years before this discovery. The sturgeon is thought to have died from old age, and may have been 80 years old. As with many of the reports originating from Loch Ness, the seemingly erratic movements observed by witnesses may originate from the wakes created by the movement of boats across the loch. Due to the length and relatively narrow width of Loch Morar, these wakes are funneled up the lake even after the boats that created them have passed out of sight. Also, the movement of flocks of birds or seals can create the illusion of a single larger creature, with many humps emerging from the water. It is also interesting, not to mention a little convenient, that the descriptions of Morag have changed drastically over time, from a female Banshee-like spirit to a relict plesiosaur. The latter prehistoric survivor paradigm being applied to Morag only became common after similar accounts of the Loch Ness monster emerged in the early 20th century. Beyond this, the concept of dangerous aquatic creatures dwelling in the lochs of Scotland is an ancient one, with older folklore containing tales of the shape-shifting horse-like kelpie and the more amiable Tarbh whisky, the water bulls. It would appear that the Scottish lake monsters build on these older traditions, merging with the dinosaur craze of the late 19th century and the persistent idea of prehistoric survivors so popular at that time. In this way, lake monsters can be seen as an ever-evolving part of Scottish folklore, rather than mysterious living plesiosaurs. Thanks for watching, everyone. Next week I'll be covering more Triassic archosauromorphs, so I'll see you again soon. Cheerio.